Hey y'all, Trustee McAllister here with your audio for the week. If you feel like listening to the audio of the readings, this is the place for you. If you just want to read them silently to yourself, you can just skip this video and don't even worry about it. Okay, so this week I'm reading Elliptical by Harryette Mullin, the poem, and this is actually the poem that you need to read / listen to in order to contribute to the discussion board this week, okay? I ask you to identify who you think the us and the them is in this poem, okay? Similar to what we did last week in class with the other poems. And then I actually ask you to complete some of her sentences, and I'll talk a little bit more about that when I'm done reading the poem. So Elliptical by Harryette Mullin. Then I'm going to read An Outsider by Choice by Kyle Spencer. And I just printed out hard copies of these. They're the exact same as the ones that you have links to there in the document. And finally, Hello, My Name Is by Jason Kim. Okay, so please follow along on the text, like look at the text and read it to yourself while I read it out loud to you. It's a good reading strategy. It helps you become a better reader. So rather than just listening to me, open up the documents and follow along as well. Okay. So first, Elliptical. This is a poem that is written in a different kind of a format. So just looking at it, you can see that each sentence ends in ... or ellipses or an ellipse. So ellipses, you sometimes use those like when you're texting and you like have more that you want to say, but you're not going to say it. So I would have gone to that party, but ... right? And so that tells whoever you're texting, like, oh, there's more to this story. There's more information, but they're not saying it for some reason, or they want me to just kind of fill in the blank, right? So this whole poem is all sentences that end with ... So as the reader, you kind of get to, make an assumption about what you think she's talking about and how you think she would finish, how would you finish the sentences? Who do you think she's talking about here? Okay. Oh my goodness, excuse me. All right. First, Elliptical by Harryette Mullin. They just can't seem to, they should try harder to. They ought to be more. We all wish they weren't so, they never, they always, sometimes they, once in a while they, however, it is obvious that their overall tendency has been, the consequences of which have been, they don't appear to understand that if only they would make an effort to, but we know how difficult it is for them to, many of them remain unaware of, some of who should know better simply refuse to. Of course, their perspective has been limited by, on the other hand, they obviously feel entitled to, certainly we can't forget that they, nor can it be denied that we know that this has had an enormous impact on nevertheless, their behavior strikes us as our interactions unfortunately have been. Love that. Poetry is always open to interpretation, but this is particularly open to interpretation because she does not finish the sentences. She doesn't give us a lot of information here. We kind of have to make an assumption about who we think she's talking about. So who is the us? Who is the them? Who are the outsiders? Who are the people that belong in this poem? I don't know. I have my own assumptions and my own theories, but I want to hear what yours are. That's the first question in your discussion this week. The second is assuming, I don't think this is necessarily what Harryette Mullin intended with her poem, but I'm just saying, assuming it's adults talking to teenagers or teenagers talking to adults, how would you finish some of these sentences? So that's the second thing I ask you to do in your discussion this week. Okay? All right, next, An Outsider by Choice by Kyle Spencer from the New York Times. This is about students choosing their college or trade school either based on whether they would fit in really well or whether they would be very different. And teenagers these days are kind of having to grapple with those choices, and some are going one way and some are going the other way, and there seems to be benefits to both. Last fall, when John DeGravio arrived as a freshman at Williams College, a private liberal arts institution in the Berkshires, the conservative from Central Texas expected to be in the political minority. He did not expect to be ridiculed. But in the winter, when he returned from an anti-abortion rally with the school's Catholic student group in Washington, the college's usually harmonious Instagram account, which featured a photo of the trip, received numerous enraged comments. Some posters booed the group. One called it embarrassing. Another suggested the students should, quote, start a better club. At first, Mr. D was taken aback. Then he took his outsider status as a calling. A few months earlier, he had started a small conservative club. He decided to make it bigger. He invited a speaker to give an evening talk on, quote, what it means to be a conservative. Dozens of students showed up. I think I really hit a chord, he said. These days, elite students like Mr. D, who can financially and or academically choose from an array of colleges, are often obsessed with finding the right fit. Surveys like ones conducted by the EAB, an education consulting firm in Washington, routinely indicate that for this group, fitting in is one of the top factors when deciding where to go to school. But for some students, like Mr. D, 19, but some students are discovering the pros and cons of being an outsider. Today, top public universities are accepting out-of-state students in record numbers. Lesser-known schools, sometimes referred to as hidden gems, have made big efforts to lure high-performing students from far away. Some college counselors say they are encouraging students to explore universities in Canada, England, and even Abu Dhabi. But many say they don't recommend that for every high school senior. Nikki Bruno, a New Jersey-based admissions coach, says students have to have an adventurous spirit and seem particularly confident before she suggests a college environment that may feel a bit out of their comfort zone. Yodit Gebretsadik, 20, is that kind of student. At first, being at Duke University in Durham, North Carolina, which has one of the most moneyed student bodies in the country, was isolating for Ms. G, a mechanical engineering major from Jacksonville, Florida, who got there by way of a competitive scholarship program. Ms. G, whose father manages a convenience store, said many students arrived with coveted internships their parents had helped them get and had high school engineering experiences inside and out of the classroom that she didn't know existed. She was cloaked in doubt during her first semester. But she said an active campus program designed to support first-generation college students helped her connect with professors and other students like her. Soon, she began to excel in her science and math classes, in many cases outperforming the peers who had arrived with more initial exposure. It was a huge confidence booster, she said. Sociologists who study outsiders say it's no surprise. They say people who can find even a small support group can become more fully engaged with who they are and what their core values are by being in a place that feels foreign. Pietro Gerasi, 22, a libertarian who graduated in May from Vassar College, a small liberals arts school in Poughkeepsie, New York, with a degree in astronomy, says being a political outsider requires some courage. During Mr. G's freshman year, he joined a small campus chapter of the Young Americans for Liberty, a Washington-based libertarian youth group, and reconnected it with the national headquarters. Making friends became challenging. People here don't like it when you go around saying taxation is theft, he said. Most of his friends are liberal, he said, and some came to the group's meetings and were eager to engage in fruitful conversation. And Mr. G, who speaks with gusto about his ideology, did not let the political tension deter him from touring Cuba with the school's choir and spending time in the school's observatory. Tiago Rachelson, 19, is white, and he attends Morehouse College, a historically black school in Atlanta. Mr. Rachelson, a sociology major, said he enrolled because the mission of the school called to him. His decision, though, caused waves among some students who were interviewed for a documentary released this summer by Vice. One young man, commenting in the documentary about the central role historically black colleges and universities have played for Black Americans, said the idea that a lot of white students would inundate his school made him feel disrespected. Mr. R acknowledged those feelings, but he said that navigating the experience had been transformational. And he is not alone in feeling that the outsider role can have a profound impact on one's sense of self. Amir Goldberg, an associate professor of organizational behavior at Stanford University Graduate School of Business, who studies outsiders inside the workplace, says being an outsider can cause culture shock, but that doesn't have to be a bad thing. If you have support, that shock can be translated into an advantage, he said. That was the case for Jonah Shainberg, a fencer from Rye, New York, who was Jewish. When he was accepted to Notre Dame, a football-heavy Catholic university in Indiana, his mother balked at the idea. "I'm not sending my Jewish son to Notre Dame," Mr. Shainberg recalled her saying. He was also skeptical. But once he was there, Mr. S., who graduated this year with a bachelor's degree in business administration, discovered something about himself he had not totally understood before. His faith was central to his identity. "I think Notre Dame made me more Jewish," he said. For Elise Hutchison, 21, the opposite was true. Her time at Hillsdale College, a Christian college in Hillsdale, Michigan, helped her get in touch with her views on reproductive rights, immigration, and social welfare programs. When she arrived, she said, "I knew I wasn't a conservative, but I didn't know I was a liberal." By her junior year, she had re-energized a defunct club for campus Democrats and realized she was agnostic. She graduated this year with a degree in psychology and art and took a job as a research assistant at Brown University, a liberal-leaning college in Providence, Rhode Island. While Ms. H admits it's a relief to now be around like-minded thinkers, she says fitting in comes with its own pitfalls. "I don't want to become complacent because the ideas I have aren't being questioned anymore," she said. Love that. So interesting to think about the positives and the negatives that can come out of both being an outsider and belonging. They both have, good things and bad things, depending on how you approach the situation and what kind of person you are and where you're at in your life and all kinds of different things. Love it. Okay, the last story I'm reading is a memoir. So this is the last one was like a newspaper article, and this one is Jason Kim writing about his own life and his own experiences. Okay, so hello, my name is by Jason Kim. Starting at the very top where it talks about the author. Jason Kim is an Asian American screenwriter and playwright. In this personal account, Kim discusses his experiences emigrating from Korea at a young age and his struggle to fit into American culture while maintaining his identity. I love how this unit really fits in with our last unit, the identity unit. They are very closely tied together, and that is not something I had thought about before I put these two units right next to each other, so that just worked out really well. Okay. I will never forget the day I picked a new name. I was standing in front of my class on my first day of school at Craig Elementary in St. Louis, Missouri. I had, only a day before, landed at Lambert Airport after a 16-hour flight from Seoul, South Korea. I was 10 years old. I was nervous, terrified, and jet-lagged, and I was wearing a vest because I thought it was chic. For my entire life, everyone, including me, had known me by my Korean name, Jun Hyuk. But here, in this new country, in a brand new classroom full of foreign faces, I had to pick a new, easy-to-pronounce American name. Jason. Jason Kim. How did I settle on Jason? Because I didn't speak any English. Because my teacher didn't speak any Korean. And because it was either going to be Aladdin from my favorite childhood Disney tale or Jason from the Mighty Morphin Power Rangers. I spent the next decade wanting nothing more than to look like a Larry Lorberbaum or a Garrett Kennedy. I still vividly remember my first time at recess, a confusing experience for several reasons, in large part because hanging off monkey bars and making each other cry during dodgeball were not educationally sanctioned activities in Asia. What was so fun about waiting in line, running up the steps, and going down a tiny slide over and over again? What was the value in sprinting after your classmate like a person with rabies, screaming, "Tag!" Why didn't anyone look, sound, or act like me? I spent most days at recess sitting alone on the sidelines, eating the special snack that my mother had packed. The snack, a rice cake or a piece of candy from Korea, was always accompanied by a note, usually a joke, and sometimes embellished with a drawing, which often looked like an abstract painting when it was meant to be a sketch of our beloved deceased poodle. A month had passed when a teacher finally tapped me on the shoulder. "Are you okay, sweetie?" Before I could answer, another teacher rang out, "Maybe he likes sitting alone. Maybe that's the Asian way." But in truth, I wanted to participate. I wanted to run up to Timmy like a crazy person and yell, "You're it!" I just didn't know how. Outside on the playground, sitting alone at recess, I learned to hate being Asian. I wanted desperately, more than anything, to be white. I immediately forced my parents to stop calling me Jun Hyuk at home. I named myself after some guy in a live-action children's television series, and by God, they were going to call me by that name. I got rid of my fitted vests for loose-fitting basketball jerseys. I bought tickets to an Incubus concert and threw away all my K-pop CDs. I stopped reading Korean children's books in order to figure out what the hell was going on with James and his giant peaches. At the dinner table, I committed the 2 worst sins that a Korean son could possibly commit. I stopped speaking Korean, and I stopped eating Korean food. My parents would try to talk to me over a bowl of kimchi stew, and I would pout and ask in English if we could order the meat lover's pie from Pizza Hut. For my 11th birthday, my mom made me my favorite Korean dish, ojinga bokyeom, spicy stir-fried squid, and I looked at her with disdain as I declared, "This is disgusting." The next day for dinner, she made me a cheeseburger. I promptly told her it tasted inauthentic and made her drive me to McDonald's. Oh, and no more special snacks either, unless they were artificially flavored and made by Kraft. I was a heinous child. Sorry, Mom. I graduated from high school and moved to New York City for college, where my primary goal was to blend in. But more and more, my new friends wanted to know about all the things that made me uncomfortable in the Midwest. To them, being an immigrant made me interesting. At dinner parties, people would fawn over the Korean food and ask for my mom's recipes. They even wanted to know about my childhood in Seoul. And at karaoke, people were genuinely excited that I could sing both Girls' Generation and Natalie Imbruglia's Torn. All of a sudden, being different was an asset, not a risk. In New York, I didn't have to be ashamed about being an Asian immigrant. I could just be ashamed about everything else in my life. A year after I finished graduate school in playwriting, almost 2 decades after I'd landed at Lambert Airport, Lena and Jenny cast me as an Asian American graduate student on the 4th season of Girls. Almost immediately after the episodes aired, I began receiving emails, tweets, and Facebook messages from young Asian American writers, actors, and performers who were excited to see a fellow Asian face on TV. I was shocked. How could this be? I appeared on the show for like a millisecond, and my Beyoncé sweatshirt was definitely doing more work than I did on screen. It was genuinely baffling to think that anyone could look at my very Korean face and feel a sense of connection, much less react in a positive way to the very features I hated about myself for so long. We are at the point in our culture where people are finally beginning to talk about Asian identities in the media. I have not been at the forefront of those issues. I've been crouching in the back, hiding in the corner, watching people like Margaret Cho, Daniel Dae Kim, Ali Wong, George Takei. I know who he is. I don't know how I'm saying his name, though. Constance Wu and Aziz Ansari courageously speak up about the various issues that Asian Americans face in Hollywood. The issues exist both in front of the camera and behind the scenes. There are barely any roles written for Asian actors. And in general, the roles that can be played by a person of any race do not tend to go to Asian actors. Worst of all, the few roles that should go to Asian actors, some very high profile, are being portrayed by white actors. Behind the camera, there are equally few Asian American writers, producers, studio executives, authors, and editors. And while there are certainly a significant number of people struggling to make it, their efforts seem to go largely unrecognized. I have always been terrified of speaking up on behalf of diversity, which to me means a state of inclusion, a choice to be aware of the vast and profound range of identities in this world, including your own. I've been terrified because I grew up in a country without many visible Asian Americans in the culture, and I learned to hate every part of myself that felt foreign and strange. Unfortunately, years later, this is a problem that many young Asian Americans continue to face. How do you understand yourself in a diverse country that actively chooses to ignore your particular kind of diversity? At one point during my 20s, I took a long, dramatic look in the mirror and realized, you will be Korean for the rest of your life. As a teenager growing up in the Midwest, that thought made me cringe. Now, it makes me happy and deeply proud. My dream now as a 30-year-old is for our country to become a place where a cameo like mine would go completely unnoticed, and to see every third grade teacher tell his or her students, keep your name. You don't have to change a thing. Love that. Love all of the articles and poems this week. So good. All right. Thanks for listening. Love you guys. I'll see you in class. Bye.